Welcome at a boring history for sleep. Like, comments, and subscribe.
Close your eyes. Imagine you are standing on a plain so flat, so immense, that the horizon forms a perfect, unbroken circle around you. There are no hills. There are no mountains. There is only the snow, endless, pristine, and blindingly white, stretching out beneath a sky the color of bruised slate. A single wind whispers through the sparse, skeletal pines, carrying with it the cold breath of the Arctic. This is Russia, not as a map with borders, or as a headline on a screen, but as an ancient, breathing expanse of earth, time, and solitude. Tonight, we aren't here for the loud chapters of history. We aren't here for the clashing of swords or the roar of revolutions. We are here for the quiet heartbeat beneath the snow. We are here to drift into the deep, hypnotic, and forgotten corridors of the Russian past, a history born of immense spaces, long winter nights, and a strange, beautiful melancholy that has lulled travelers, czars, and poets to sleep for 1,000 years. Take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out. Let the warmth of your blanket wrap around you. Let the outside world fade away. There is nothing you need to fix, nowhere you need to be, and nothing to solve. Just listen to the rhythm of the centuries, unfolding like a slow, quiet river frozen in time. Let us drift back over 1,000 years, to a time when the geography of this northern world was written entirely in water and timber. If you looked down from above at the land that would become Russia in the 9th century, you would not see cities of stone or paved roads. You would see an ocean of green, the great Eurasian taiga, a dense, endless forest of fir, birch, and pine, laced together by a silver labyrinth of slow-moving rivers. The people who lived here were few and scattered. They lived in small wooden villages clustered near riverbanks, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to watch them with silent, moss-covered patience. Their lives were dictated by the seasons. Summer was a brief, frantic rush of sunlight, berries, and sowing. Winter was a long, dark, absolute stillness, months spent huddled around a central hearth inside a low-ceilinged wooden cabin, listening to the wind howling through the chimney like a restless spirit. Into this quiet, watery wilderness came strangers. They were the Varangians, Vikings from the cold coasts of Scandinavia. But they did not come with the fiery, destructive rage that terrified the coasts of Western Europe. Here, the rivers demanded a different approach. The great waterways of the East, the Volga, the Dnieper, the Volkhov, did not lead to pillaged monasteries. They led deep into the heart of the Eurasian continent, connecting the Baltic Sea to the mysterious, shimmering riches of Byzantium and the East. Picture these Norsemen in their long, narrow wooden boats, gliding silently over glassy, dark water. The morning mist clings to the surface of the river. The oars dip into the water with a rhythmic, hypnotic splash, drip, splash, drip. They did not conquer this land with an army, they drifted into it. They set up trading posts along the riverbanks, trading amber, furs, and honey for silk and silver. Over generations, these Norse traders married the local Slavic tribes. They blended together, sharing their hearths, their gods, and their stories. And according to the ancient chronicles, the local tribes looked out across their vast, untamed forests, sighed, and said to the newcomers, "Our land is great and abundant, but there is no order in it. Come and rule, and reign over us." Whether that ancient story is literal truth or the romantic myth of a later age, it captures the ancient Russian yearning for center, for anchor, for a steady hand to hold back the chaos of a boundless world. Thus began Kievan Rus, not as a rigid empire of stone, but as a loose confederation of wooden towns strung along the amber-tinted rivers, sleeping peacefully beneath the vast, indifferent northern sky. As you journey further south on your mental map, the trees begin to thin. The tall pines give way to rolling hills of wild grass, stretching as far as the eye can see. This is the Pontic-Caspian steppe. It is an ocean of land, just like the northern forest, but completely open, exposed to the sun and the fierce, howling winds that sweep uninterrupted all the way from the mountains of Central Asia. For centuries, this steppe was a highway for nomadic horsemen, peoples who did not live in houses of wood, but in felt tents called yurts, moving with the herds of horses and sheep, following the invisible rhythms of the grass and the seasons. To the settled farmers of the forest, the steppe was a place of mystery and quiet terror. It was a space without boundaries, where anything could appear over the horizon at any moment. And then, in the 13th century, the horizon changed forever. A great rumble shook the earth. It was not the sound of a storm, but the thunderous hoofbeats of the Mongol Golden Horde. Under the leadership of Batu Khan, grandsons of the legendary Genghis Khan, a vast wave of horsemen swept out of the eastern plains. They moved with terrifying speed, but once they conquered, a strange thing happened. They did not burn every village to the ground and leave. They demanded tribute, and then they imposed a vast, sprawling peace. Imagine the quiet that followed the storm. For over 2 centuries, the Russian principalities, now fractured, small, and weary, sat beneath the shadow of the Golden Horde. It was a time of immense, heavy stillness. Princes had to travel thousands of miles east across the plains to the camp of the Mongol Khan, waiting humbly outside his tent for weeks in the dust and the wind, just to receive a scrap of paper granting them the right to rule their own frozen towns. During these long decades of quiet subjugation, the character of the Russian lands shifted. To survive under a distant, administrative empire, governance had to become absolute, centralized, and silent. The princes learned to look not to the west, with its debating parliaments and stone castles, but to the east, where power was concentrated in a single, unshakable will. Slowly, quietly, like a seed germinating beneath heavy winter snow, a new center of gravity began to form. Its name was Moscow. Picture early Moscow in the 14th and 15th centuries. It is not yet the city of golden domes and grand red brick palaces that we know today. It is a modest, sturdy fortress town built entirely of dark, resinous oak logs, perched on a gentle hill above the winding Moscow River. Heavy morning fog rolls off the water, wrapping the wooden ramparts and the thatched roofs of the houses in a thick, damp blanket of white. Inside the Kremlin walls, life moves at the pace of a ticking clock in an empty room. The church bells ring out across the misty air, deep, resonant, bronze notes that echo over the sleeping wooden cabins and the silent pine forests beyond. The grand princes of Moscow were patient men. They did not fight loud, glorious wars if they could avoid them. Instead, they acted like careful accountants of land and loyalty. They bought up neighboring parcels of forest, settled legal disputes with neighboring villages, and whispered quietly in the ears of the Mongol Khans, slowly consolidating power while the rest of the world looked the other way. They were building something enduring in the quiet. And then, in 1453, something monumental happened far away to the south that would change the destiny of Moscow forever. The great Christian city of Constantinople, the heart of the Eastern Orthodox world, fell to the Ottoman Empire. The ancient Byzantine Empire was no more. The light of the East had gone out. Back in Moscow, the The princes looked around their wooden fortress, looked up at the great gray sky, and felt a profound, heavy sense of destiny settle upon their shoulders. If Constantinople had fallen because it strayed from the true faith, then Moscow must take its place. Moscow would become the third Rome. With this grand, solemn realization, the humble town of logs began to transform. Italian architects were invited north to build walls of red brick and soaring cathedrals of white stone within the Kremlin. Yet, even as stone replaced wood, the deep, soulful melancholy of the northern forest remained untouched. As the centuries rolled forward, the Russian land expanded outward like rings on the surface of a still pond. It crept eastward across the Ural Mountains, into the vast, snowy wilderness of Siberia, a land so empty, so quiet, that it seemed to belong to another world entirely. Trappers, exiles, and lone adventurers pushed deeper and deeper into the taiga, following the rivers, building small wooden winter huts, wrapped in thick furs against a cold so deep it made the breath crackle in the air. Back in the centers of power, the rulers took on titles that matched the scale of the landscape. They were no longer mere princes, they were czars, autocrats whose word was law over a territory that spanned multiple time zones. Think of Ivan the Terrible, a man whose life is often painted in the dramatic colors of madness and violence, but whose reign, when viewed from the perspective of time, was also steeped in a deep, agonizing religious devotion. In his later years, tormented by guilt and the ghosts of his own actions, Ivan would retreat for weeks at a time to remote monasteries nestled in the silent northern forests, like the great Trinity Lavra of St. Sergius. Imagine the atmosphere inside one of those monastic cells. The room is small, lit by the warm, flickering glow of a single beeswax candle. The walls are covered in dark, enigmatic wooden icons, painted images of saints with long, thin faces and enormous, sorrowful eyes that seem to look right through you, no matter where you stand in the room. There is no sound except for the rhythmic scratching of a monk's quill on parchment, copying ancient prayers, and the distant, low murmur of nocturnal chanting echoing down the stone corridors. The monks lived in deliberate stillness. They believed that salvation could only be found in silence, fasting, and the quiet contemplation of eternity. This ascetic spirit, this profound willingness to endure suffering, cold, and emptiness without complaint, permeated the entire Russian consciousness. It taught generations of people that the physical world was fleeting, harsh, and difficult, but that beneath the suffering lay a pure, unchanging spiritual truth. As we reach the middle of this first leg of our journey, let us pause and look out across the landscape we have traversed. We have watched the rivers flow from the Baltic to the Byzantine south. We have felt the quiet shadow of the steppe nomads, the slow, patient accumulation of power within the wooden walls of early Moscow, and the solitary prayers whispered in the frozen northern monasteries. Everything in this land seems scaled to eternity. The trees are too tall to count, the rivers are too long to see the end of, the winter is too deep to fight. The only sensible response to such immensity is to surrender to it, to wrap yourself in a heavy wool coat, pull your fur hat down over your ears, and let the quiet wash over you like a gentle wave. The snow continues to fall. Outside, flake by silent flake, covering the old tracks, smoothing over the rough edges of the earth, turning the entire world into a blank, peaceful page of white. In a moment, we will continue our journey into the later centuries, when grand palaces of ice and gold rose along the misty canals of St. Petersburg, when great thinkers pondered the meaning of the Russian soul by the light of a smoking oil lamp, and when the 19th century world fell asleep to the rhythm of the Great Siberian Railway. For now, just close your eyes a little tighter. Listen to the steady, rhythmic hum of the northern wind. You are safe. You are warm. The history of the world is vast and ancient, and tonight, it is rocking you gently to sleep. Take a slow, deep breath in, and let it drift away. Let us open our eyes once more, but the world has changed. We have left behind the ancient, wooden heart of Moscow with its golden domes and narrow, crooked alleys. We find ourselves now at the edge of the Western Sea, in the early 18th century, during the reign of Tsar Peter the Great. Imagine standing on the banks of the Neva River. Before Peter came along, this place was not a city, it was a vast, watery wilderness of moss, peat bogs, and shivering willow trees, shrouded in a perpetual, damp autumn mist. It was a place where nobody lived, where the damp fog crept up from the Gulf of Finland and swallowed the sun for months at a time. And yet, here is where Peter decided to carve his grand, imperial window to Europe. Picture tens of thousands of men, peasants, soldiers, and convicts, working in the gray, freezing mud. There were no modern machines, there were only wooden shovels, wheelbarrows, and bare hands. They drove millions of wooden piles deep into the treacherous, shifting marshland to create a foundation for a city that looked like it belonged in Amsterdam or Venice, rather than the edge of the Russian north. As the years passed, great palaces of pastel green, pale yellow, and crisp white rose along the granite-lined canals. Statues of marble gods peered down through the gray drizzle. Wide, geometric avenues stretched out into the distance, perfectly straight, cutting through the damp mist like the strokes of a pen. Yet, for all its grand European architecture, Petersburg could never quite shake the strange, haunting melancholy of the northern marsh. During the summer months, the city experienced the white nights, a bizarre, magical phenomenon where the sun never truly sets. Twilight lingers all night long. The sky turns a pale, luminous pearl gray, casting a soft, ghostly glow over the silent canals and the empty granite bridges. There is no darkness, only a strange, dreamlike suspension of time. People would walk along the embankments at 3 o'clock in the morning in total daylight, speaking in whispers, as if afraid to break the spell of an eternal, quiet evening. And when winter returned, the city locked up in ice. The Neva River froze solid, thick enough for carriages and sleighs to cross. The mist turned to frost, coating the iron lampposts in delicate, glittering crystals, while the great palaces slept beneath heavy, silent blankets of white. Let us step inside one of those Petersburg apartments in the middle of the 19th century. The wind is howling outside, driving dry, powdery snow against the double-paned windows. But inside, the room is warm, dim, and impossibly cozy. In the center of the mahogany table sits a large, gleaming copper samovar. Listen to it. It sings a low, steady song, a gentle, rhythmic hiss of boiling water that has lulled generations of Russian writers, thinkers, and dreamers into long hours of quiet contemplation. A small glass of strong black tea steams in front of you, flavored with a spoonful of sweet raspberry jam. This was the great age of the Russian soul, a time when the educated elite sat by the fire late into the night, wrapped in heavy wool shawls, debating the meaning of life, history, and the vast, silent land that surrounded them. Think of the great writers of this era, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Turgenev. Their books are not fast-paced adventures, they are sprawling, slow-moving rivers of words. They invite you to sit down by the hearth and watch human nature unfold with all its quiet flaws, its deep sorrows, and its unexpected moments of grace. They describe the rustle of autumn leaves in a country estate, the creak of a carriage wheel on a muddy road, the tolling of a village church bell across an empty field. Imagine visiting a remote country estate in the dead of winter. The house is built of weathered pine, surrounded by birch groves that stand like 1,000 white pillars against the snow. Inside, a heavy tiled stove radiates a deep, gentle warmth that penetrates to your bones. An oil lamp burns on a green velvet desk. A heavy velvet curtain blocks out the cold from the hallway. Time seems to stop here. There are no schedules, no deadlines, no rushing. There is only the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, the soft crackle of birch logs in the stove, and the quiet turning of a heavy paper page. Here, people learn to look inward. Because the physical landscape outside was so overwhelmingly vast and indifferent, the human interior became a universe unto itself. Every sorrow was felt deeply, every joy was treasured like a rare amber bead found washed up on a riverbank. As the 19th century drew to a close, human ambition stretched out to touch the farthest edges of the empire once more. Picture the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway, the longest continuous railway line in the world, stretching over 9,000 kilometers from Moscow all the way to the Pacific Ocean at Vladivostok. For decades, crossing Siberia meant months of exhausting travel by horse-drawn sleigh, ankle-deep in mud during the spring thaw, or freezing in the bitter wind of January. Now, laying an iron ribbon across the earth, the steam locomotive conquered the emptiness. Imagine standing on the edge of the Siberian taiga in 1900 as the great steam train approaches. You hear it long before you see it, a deep, rhythmic chugging that echoes through the endless pine trees like a mechanical heartbeat. Chug, 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 puff, puff. Out of the white mist rolls the massive engine, its brass fittings gleaming, smoke billowing into the gray sky. You climb aboard, find a seat by the window in a small, wood-paneled compartment, and settle back as the train begins to roll. For the next week, sometimes 2 weeks, you do nothing. You simply watch the world go by. Through the double glass of the window, you see an endless moving panorama of nature in its purest form. First come the rolling birch forests of the western plains. Then the great, dark wall of the Ural Mountains, where the trees lean under heavy loads of snow. Then, the infinite, flat expanse of the Siberian tundra, a flat, frozen desert of white where nothing moves for hundreds of miles except the wind and the occasional shadow of a hawk. In the dining car, travelers sit over glasses of tea and metal holders podstokaniki, watching the telegraph wires rise and fall in a hypnotic, mathematical rhythm outside the window. Up, down, up, down. Conversations are quiet, low, and philosophical. Strangers share pieces of dark rye bread, cheese, and hard-boiled eggs, talking softly about where they have come from and where they are going, while outside, the great, silent wilderness embraces the train, carrying it gently through the night. As our long journey through the corridors of Russian history draws to a close, let us bring our focus back to the present moment, right here, right now. We have traveled across 1,000 years in the blink of an eye. We have drifted down amber rivers with Viking traders, listened to the evening bells of wooden Moscow, felt the damp mist of Peter's northern marshes, sipped tea by the samovar during a snowy street. Petersburg evening, and watched the endless pine trees of Siberia slide past a train window. Through all of it, one thing has remained unchanged: the deep, quiet heartbeat of the land. Empires rise and fall. Czars and politicians come and go like leaves blown across the autumn grass. But the great forests remain. The rivers continue their slow, silent journey to the sea. The snow falls, flake by gentle flake, covering the past in a clean, white sheet of absolute peace. You are wrapped in your blankets. The room around you is dark and still. Let all the thoughts of the day, every task, every worry, every unanswered question, dissolve into the vast, snowy expanse of the Russian night. There is nothing left to figure out. The history of the world is long, but tonight, it has brought you to a place of profound rest. The wind outside is soft. The cabin is warm. Close your eyes. Let go completely. Drift and sleep.
Disclaimer: while the historical accounts detailed here are grounded in rigorous research, we have integrated AI generated imagery to provide a vivid window into the past. Please note that these visuals are intended as creative interpretation rather than precise historical documentation. Our primary objective is to offer an engaging, immersive educational journey through history.